Hello everybody and welcome to the Thursday edition of Video Clips. I want to talk about children and overeating and weight gain. Studies consistently show that kids who become overweight or obese as children track into adulthood and often maintain that weight gain throughout adulthood. And then we see that, and I talked about this last week, the failure rate for weight loss programs is so huge. It's over 99%. I mean, you can't think of anything worse than this. So obviously, if we can prevent this from happening, since it seems to be so hard to treat, this would be a good idea. So I want to focus on what causes kids to eat poorly and end up with weight problems. So these habits often begin early in childhood, and a recent meta-analysis looked at the various factors that contribute to weight gain. The analysis included 20 studies that were done in the United States, Europe, and Australia with over 1,000 patients. And several themes were identified that were consistent across these studies. The first was that children's taste preferences and their attitudes toward food and likes and dislikes often determined which foods were given to them. Parents of fussy eaters acknowledged that they gave their kids what they wanted to eat. Now, they seemed to be aware that there were some strategies that might allow the kids to eat better. Some of which I disagree with, by the way. Negotiation, and I'll get back to that. Repeated exposure to healthy food and encouraging children to help with food preparation. I think it's a great idea to just keep putting food in front of children because studies show that particularly for little kids, continued exposure to a food makes them more receptive to eating it. And food preparation. Kids love to grow food and they love to make food and they're much more inclined to eat what they grow and or make. But I have to comment here on the negotiating thing. Negotiating with preschool-age children about food, bedtimes, behavior, or anything else is inappropriate. Children are not equal partners with their parents in making these types of decisions. And so, of course, you can consider some likes and dislikes, but the bottom line is that one way to get children to eat food that's good for them is to just serve that. And actually there was a special on television about this issue. It was part of like a 2020 or Primetime, one of those shows, where a pediatrician was basically telling parents this. And then the parents who followed directions and didn't give their kids bad food but just served the good food, within 2 or 3 days the kids were eating it. Whereas the parents who caved and started giving their kids bad food when they wouldn't eat good food, the problem was still going on weeks later in their homes. So anyway, give kids good food and they will eat it. That's the first thing. Another factor that consistently affected food choices, and the parents acknowledged it, was the behavior that they modeled for their kids. Parents and other family members and peers influenced dietary choices, and parents who preferred fast food and packaged foods admitted that this stood in the way of healthier choices for their children. And I'm sorry to say I have seen that with some of the members of Wellness Forum Health, people who have been reluctant to help their children get healthy through dietary change because they didn't want to have to do it. Sad but true, and it makes me want to lock them in the basement, the parents that is, not the kids, and feed them rice and vegetables until they come to their senses, but I guess there are laws against that. We can't do that. All right, parents' lack of knowledge about nutrition, lack of support, lack of cooking skills were an issue. And another thing that came into play was that parents were more concerned about their kids being underweight than being overweight, and parents who were overweight had inaccurate perceptions of their children's health status. And I've also seen that here, that a child who I clearly think has a weight problem, the parents don't really think so. And this happens all the time when people start eating well and dropping weight. Everybody goes, oh my gosh, you're going to fade away, you're so skinny. Some people tell me I'm too skinny, and believe me, I know the camera's kind of hard, but if you were to meet me personally, I don't think you'd think I was too skinny. But people tell me that. The perception of who's overweight and who's not is kind of silly in our country. Lack of time was an issue, and parents said that sometimes they felt they had to choose between healthy eating and facilitating their children's activities. And they also reported resorting to fast food because they worked long hours and they didn't have time to cook. And then financial considerations. The perception is still out there that eating health-promoting food is more expensive than eating junk food, which actually the opposite is true. And some even stated that they thought that healthy foods should be subsidized. And by the way, I don't think that the government should get into any more nutrition policy or anything else, but I'm for ending the subsidies on the unhealthy foods. Let's put it that way. I don't think we need to subsidize broccoli as much as we need to stop subsidizing chicken nuggets. 10 studies reported using unhealthy foods as rewards for good behavior, and this is a terrible practice. It sometimes happens in schools where teachers will give kids treats in return for a job well done or good behavior. And there are two issues with this. One is that, my gosh, kids don't need any more reasons to eat junk foods, and the other thing is it avoids teaching personal responsibility. Behaving well and doing work in school, that's what's expected of you. It's your personal responsibility. It's not something extraordinary that deserves reward. I think about how my parents would think about some of this stuff based on the way that my sister and I were brought up, and we didn't get reward for just doing the things that were expected of us. 10 studies reported that kids can tend to consume junk foods when they're available. On the other hand, controlling the home environment was helpful, and I totally agree with that. Not surprisingly, advertising, packaging, and food placement in stores influence choices. Now, here's what I think is the good news. The bad news is that we have some parents who need some type of parenting training. Again, like to kidnap them, give them lectures in the basement while they eat rice and beans until they come around. But these are all fixable problems. I mean, it's a myth that eating healthy food is expensive. And we've proven that. We have taught people to do this using food stamps, SNAP money. It's also a myth that preparing healthy food is excessively time-consuming. I think I'm going to do a video about this for our member site and show how I function without doing much in the way of cooking. I mean, today you can buy pre-washed greens and pre-sliced mushrooms and microwavable rice and vegetables, and there's just, it does not have to be time-consuming. And on days that I work 18 hours and have very short breaks, I don't spend time, but I do not eat garbage either. Stores are packed with convenient foods, healthy foods. Clearing the homes of junk foods is powerful. I have to do it myself. If I were standing in the kitchen at 11 o'clock at night thinking about eating bananas and blackberries or soy ice cream and cookies, sooner or later the cookies win out. And then educational intervention programs. You might remember a couple weeks ago I talked about this program in Spain. It was really effective in taking preschool kids and teaching them to have a different attitude about their bodies and health, and also to improve their exercise and eating habits too. So we should have more of that kind of thing going on in the community. All right, next topic, hot flashes. Common symptom associated with menopause, hot flashes. For many women, they're so severe, they ask doctors to give them drugs to make it better. Severe hot flashes are annoying. I mean, I totally get that, but they also may be a marker for something more serious. And I've talked about this a lot over the years, that when we fail to address one health issue, others will pop up. And in this case, the something more serious is cardiovascular disease. Researchers presented the findings of a study that looked at the relationship between hot flashes and cardiovascular disease at the North American Menopause Society meeting this year. The study included 304 women in their 50s, all of whom were non-smokers and who didn't have clinically diagnosed cardiovascular disease. Most women were postmenopausal, overweight, and had normal blood pressure. Hot flashes were monitored, and also intima media thickness was evaluated with carotid ultrasound. Intima media thickness is considered a marker for subclinical cardiovascular disease. Half of the women reported that they had no hot flashes, and the other half reported that they were experiencing an average of 4 per day. But when they were monitored, it showed that those women were actually experiencing over 12, and one of the researchers said that women tend to underreport the number of hot flashes that they have every day. What was really interesting is that women who had more hot flashes had higher intima media thickness than women who had none. And then women who had 12 or more had more intima media thickness than ones who had fewer, so it was dose dependent. The study controlled for a lot of things like age, race, education, weight, cholesterol, blood pressure, and medications for conditions like hypertension, diabetes, and cholesterol. The lead researcher said physiologic hot flashes explained more variance in intima media thickness than any of the other risk factors, including estradiol levels in the blood. And this study is the first one to look at the relationship, and the doc cautioned that there was no cause and effect relationship established. Now, for the record, I don't think hot flashes cause cardiovascular disease. I don't think cardiovascular disease causes hot flashes. I think the issue is that the diet and lifestyle habits and the weight gain that are associated with hot flashes are the same things that cause cardiovascular disease. And so the good news about all that is there's just only one solution. You change your diet, exercise, and lose weight. Some health professionals are saying we ought to screen women who have hot flashes more, and the usual nonsense. And of course, women often take drugs for hot flashes, which suppresses the symptom, doesn't address the cause. But the bottom line is this is just one more demonstration that if you don't address the cause of the problem, other bad things are bound to happen. All right, that's all for today. As usual, pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it. We'll be back to you next week with more news.